Welcome to a very special edition of The Box. The Box is normally Mills Reeve's webinar series for insurance brokers, intermediaries and their insurers. But today, this is a special pre-recorded edition in conjunction with Markel International. And we're going to be in discussion about diversity and inclusion in the insurance sector. I'm James Thompson. I'm a Principal Associate in Mills Reeve's Insurance Disputes Group, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Briony Healey from Markel International. Hi, Briony.
Hi, James.
Do you want to introduce yourself and tell people what you do at Markel?
Yeah, of course. So I work in the claims team at Markel. I look after professional and financial lines of business, which have gone into runoff. And I also sit on the committee of our internal inclusion network. And I'm also part of the committee of the Gender Inclusion Network, which is one of the Lloyds partner networks.
Fantastic. So to start us off, what do we mean when we're talking about diversity and inclusion? Briony, have you got some definitions that could help to frame our discussion?
Yes, so today we're going to take quite a high-level overview, as neither you nor I are experts in this field. We're both quite new to it ourselves, so it's good to start at an introductory level, and we'll try and stay away from as many acronyms and jargon as possible. So the best definition I have found is from Werner Myers, which is diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. So in the context of insurance, we contribute importance to diverse recruitment and then creating an inclusive culture in order to retain talent.
Fantastic. I really like that. So that's the what. The what are we going to be talking about? Why are we talking about diversity and inclusion in the insurance sector? I thought it'd be helpful if we started off by looking at a few statistics. Briony, do you want to kick us off with some stats?
Yes, okay. So insurance is 93% white, which is 7% higher than the UK average. This can be broken down into 94% in underwriting and 84% in broking.
1% of the UK insurance population is black.
71% of Black respondents to the Lloyds Ethnic Diversity in the Workplace report said they had experienced barriers to recruitment, which is twice as many as their white counterparts.
Only 4% of employees in Lloyds market firms identify as disabled.
Disabled people have an employment rate that is 28.8% lower than able-bodied people.
88% of employees in Lloyds market firms identify as heterosexual.
Almost a third of non-binary people and 1 in 5 trans people don't feel able to wear work attire representing their gender expression, and this is according to a Stonewall survey.
Women hold 34.3% of board roles across the FTSE 350, and there are only 17 CEOs in the FTSE 350.
According to the Lloyds Ethnic Diversity in the Workplace report, over a third of insurance workers are over 55. So based on the stats available, the insurance sector has an ageing workforce, which is sourced from a really narrow pool of people. So having an effective D&I strategy and culture is key to ensuring that insurance business can resource and grow from the widest possible pool of talent.
And finally, on the stats, from a CII, Chartered Insurance Institute survey from 2020, 63% of respondent firms said they were actively trying to attract talent from all backgrounds and ages. 54% of them wanted to make diversity part of their employee brand, but 43% of those firms didn't monitor ethnicity, race or nationality in their talent strategies at all. 76% didn't monitor sexual orientation at all, and 67% didn't monitor disability at all. So we can see from that there is some work to do for firms in the insurance market. So those are some stats just to set the scene in terms of what we're talking about today and what the challenges are for the sector. Briony, could you tell us a bit about what's happening at Markel International?
Yeah, of course. So D&I has always been an inherent part of our culture, and it's embedded in the Markel style, which is our mission statement. And over the past few years, we've seen the style grow and develop. So in 2019, we created the Global D&I Steering Committee. So this includes management from across the globe, and they set the strategic direction for our D&I efforts, which inform policy and operational decisions to sponsor employee resource groups and to champion Markel's D&I efforts. So the next evolution of that was to bring the Markel style to life, and the style in action was created. So this is made up of 5 pillars which relate to today's challenges and opportunities. So each of the pillars has an executive committee sponsor, which is followed by an employee-led network, which is open to all of employees to volunteer to be a part of. So the first pillar in the style of action created last year was the diversity and inclusion one, which led to the creation of our internal employee resource group, which is the Inclusion Network. So this is sponsored by Nick Line, who is the Chief Underwriting Officer. And then we have 2 co-chairs, Claire and Kate, who lead the network on a volunteer basis alongside their day-to-day job. Then we have the network committee, which is where I sit. And then we have a wider group of allies who are based globally. So our Inclusion Network committee is diverse already in terms of gender and ethnicity. But we also have members from our offices globally, including Canada and Germany. And we also have members where English isn't their first language. So our group is extensive enough to have thought diversity, but it also permeates various levels of the business. And then within our network, we partner with all 6 of the external market network groups sponsored by Inclusion at Lloyds. We've already arranged an event for International Women's Day, where we interviewed some senior level women at Markel. We have other events planned for the year, including a campaign titled See the World Through My Eyes, where we'll be speaking to a diverse group of employees to learn about their individual experiences of working within insurance. And then separate to the network, we also have a D&I project within our claims division. So here we're looking at initiatives we can implement on a smaller scale, more pilot schemes. And then if these are successful, we can look to roll these out to the wider company. Markel's also committed to a 3-year D&I strategy, again across 5 pillars. So far we've looked at the D&I landscape, and now we're working on building awareness and engaging employees. And then the next step will be to involve leaders within the company and eventually embed D&I into talent and business practices. Finally, our recruitment process is being enhanced to be more inclusive. So our HR department have partnered with Eventia. So we're looking both in and out of the insurance industry when we're recruiting for new roles. We also provide internal training for all managers and people involved in the hiring process to make this a bit more inclusive. We also have undertaken unconscious bias training, and this will continue to be rolled out over a number of years in sort of like bite-sized refresher blocks. So it's not designed to be like a one-off tick box exercise. It will eventually become part of our culture. We're also global sponsors of the Dive-In Festival, which we'll touch on later. I've also made a commitment to publishing our gender pay gap report annually. So that's us. What have you been doing at M&R?
Well, at Mills Reeve, diversity and inclusion is really important to what we do. I'll tell you what our goals are to start with, and I will read them so I'm specific about those. Firstly, to achieve a more diverse workforce by identifying and communicating a number of diversity and inclusion workforce profile goals. And we're working on the numbers for those goals at the moment, so that we know that what we're aiming at. Secondly, to embed good quality diversity and inclusion practices into our daily activities and decision-making processes. And thirdly, to celebrate, communicate and promote equality, diversity and inclusion, both within and outside of the firm. So those are our stated goals. Our ethos is to ensure that our people can bring their whole selves to the workplace, and we're trying to engender a culture of allyship and empathy and support. Practically, how are we doing that? We have a D&I steering group across the firm. We employ a D&I manager who's responsible for implementing our D&I policies and processes. At the moment, we've got 3 support groups for different areas. Firstly, Spectrum, which is our LGBTQ+ group. Ability, which is our support group for those with physical and other forms of disability, and Reach, which is our race, ethnicity and cultural heritage group. So those are kind of the structures and the groups that we've got in place. In terms of programs, we have 2 mentoring programs, one a straightforward, sort of more traditional style of mentoring, where those from diverse backgrounds can receive mentoring within the firm. We also have reverse mentoring. So, for example, a number of members of our board are being mentored by junior colleagues from diverse backgrounds. And that's all a part of ensuring that we've got proper understanding and empathy and allyship right throughout the business from top to bottom. Recruitment, you talked about recruitment at Markel. Recruitment's also really important to us, both in terms of our graduate recruitment. We are using software to ensure that we're overcoming issues around social mobility, to ensure that we're recruiting graduates from the broadest possible pool. And in terms of our other recruitment at other levels of the business, and we're also talking to our recruitment agencies that we work with to ensure that they know that we want to receive candidates from the broadest possible backgrounds, the most varied backgrounds. A lot of training and awareness programs ongoing, particularly around imposter syndrome, around dealing with microaggressions, around recognizing privilege. We also have a BAME bursary that we've offered for the first time in the last year, and other bursaries are in the pipeline. And in terms of how we talk to the outside world, we've undertaken a piece of work around how we address our correspondence, how we liaise using gender neutral language. We have new policies in place to ensure that all of our correspondence does employ gender neutral language, and our people are able to advertise their pronouns on their email correspondence, so that we're starting to move away from traditional assumptions based upon gender. Just finally, we are signed up to a number of organisations and pledges: the Race at Work Charter, the Social Mobility Pledge, the Happy to Talk Flexible Working, Business Disability Forum, and we're a Stonewall Diversity Champion. So there's an awful lot going on. We're very much tuned into what our clients and other organisations are doing as well, and trying to learn from the experiences of others. So that's Markel and Mills Reeve and what we're doing. But let's start to move the conversation on to look at the wider insurance market. We started with some statistics at the start of our discussion. Should we take a look at some of the numbers from the Lloyds Culture Dashboard from 2020?
Yes, absolutely. So this comes from the Lloyds Culture Survey, which first started in 2019. So there were a few events that became widely publicised and resulted in the Bloomberg article. Fortunately, the market was very quick to react to this, and this led to the creation of the Lloyds Culture Survey, which garnered over 6,000 responses. And this was taken again in 2020. So the results and the information gathered has now been shown in this Lloyds Culture Dashboard. So let's have a look at the information and some statistics.
Great. Well, shall I kick off then looking at gender and senior leadership within Lloyds businesses? We can see that men from the survey make up 55% of the total market, women 40%, 5% of people preferred not to say. But when it came to board level appointments, 81% of Lloyds market boards were male, 78% of Lloyds market executive committees were male, and the direct reports of executive committees were still 64% male. So there's a real gender skew there compared to the proportion of women in the market overall. There were 12 firms surveyed that had all male boards and all male executive committees. So there's a gender imbalance in the market overall. The problem gets worse as we look at career progression and more senior office holders. Across the market, Lloyds is setting a target of 35% for women in leadership positions and 20% at board level and executive committee positions. Important to say, the report saw a positive correlation between the number of women in the workforce overall and the percentage of women in executive committees. So succession planning and visible female leadership is obviously really important and should go without saying, but it was clear from the data that that's the case.
Okay, so moving on to ethnicity. So on a disclosure rate of 49%, the survey found the total Lloyds market to be only 1% Black, 4% Asian and 1% mixed ethnicity. It is good to see ethnicity broken down in, at a granular level rather than lumping all employees together under the BAME umbrella term. So I think it's quite important that Lloyds have recognised this, and it's helped to generate a more reliable data set. And then if we look at sexual orientation, this has a far lower disclosure rate at 3%. So of that tiny sample, 88% identified as heterosexual. So whilst that does not reflect the diversity of wider society, the bigger question might be why the response rate to this question is so low. So a lot of the data collected has been disclosed voluntarily, such as sexuality and ethnicity. I was recently talking to an underwriter who comes from a Black background, and he admitted that when he first joined the industry, he was quite reluctant to volunteer personal information such as his ethnicity, as he didn't understand the value of this being captured. However, a few years down the line, he now understands the importance, and he said he now sees data as a pioneer for change. So I thought this was quite an interesting example for companies, as it shows when you're collecting data, if you can be clear and transparent about the reasons behind the collection and informed that the intention is to drive a cultural change, employers are going to feel more comfortable volunteering this information, which is going to lead to a stronger and more complete data set moving forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, turning to look at disability. Disability fared better with a disclosure rate of 33%, but of that 33%, only 4% considered themselves disabled. So plainly a real underrepresentation of those with. To wrap up on the dashboard survey, to look briefly at the 2019 survey. So we've just been looking at the 2020, just to briefly look at the 2019 survey. For 100% of responses, women's answers reflected a more negative experience than men's, which is extraordinary. And for 100% of responses, BME colleagues' answers reflected a more negative experience with their non-BME colleagues. So there are some really stark and troubling numbers there, and reinforcing, I think, the challenges that we were trying to highlight at the start of this discussion that face the market. So the market has got a lot to do, and hopefully we're all aware of that. Briony, could you talk to us a little bit about what is happening in the market to address some of these underlying issues? I think you're going to talk to us about the Lloyds partner networks in particular.
Yes, so Inclusion at Lloyds, it sponsors these partner networks that have been, well, they haven't been set up off the back of this, but it does complement quite nicely. The first one is GIN, which is the Gender Inclusion Network, which is the network I'm involved with. So it's open to people of all genders. It acts as a support resource. There's also campaigns and events to promote gender equality. The second one is ICANN, which is the Insurance Cultural Awareness Network. So they are designed to promote multicultural inclusion and progression within the industry. And this is open to members and also allies. IFN is the Insurance Family Network. They're looking to make the insurance industry family friendly and to support a good work-life balance. IDAWN, Insurance for Disability and Wellness Network. So this looks at mental ill health, disability and long-term medical conditions. So they promote well-being and personal resilience by encouraging open discussions about how to improve mental health and disability and illness inclusion. Then we've also got LINK for members of the LGBTQ+ community and their allies who work in insurance. There's the ACIN, which is the Afro-Caribbean Insurance Network, and they act as a resource for Black and ethnic minority insurance workers And they also help to inspire and recruit the next generation into insurance. Finally, the last one is Engine, which is Next Generation Insurance Network. And they're looking at the next generation of leaders. So this is open to everybody. There's no age limit to join. It's just anybody who has an interest in becoming a leader. There's also the Dive-In Festival, which we touched on earlier. This runs every year at the end of September and has been, I believe, since 2015. It's run over a period of 4 days, and there are various talks you can attend. They're not all based on insurance, it's more looking at diversity and inclusion. For instance, last year, there was a talk with Helen Sharman, who was the first female British astronaut to visit the International Space Station. So that was a really interesting interview. And there were others on social mobility. We covered lessons from a pandemic, the sound of prejudice. So this was the first year last year where it was hosted entirely online. So there were various events you could just sign up to at some point in your working day and attend. But the entire festival was recorded, and I believe it's still available on their YouTube channel if you did want to rewatch any of those. And it will be hosted again this year. But I think we'll have to obviously wait and see how the rest of the year unfolds as to whether this will be held online again or whether there will be any in-person events. And then the other event I wish to highlight, on the 20th of May, there will be an event between ICANN and ACIM. So I believe by the time this goes out, it will have taken place, but it should be available on both of their YouTube channels, or you can simply go on LinkedIn. I'm sure there'll be a link available to that. But it's titled The Great Reset for the Insurance Industry. So it's looking 1 year on from George Floyd to discuss how this has impacted both the insurance industry and wider society. So that should be quite an interesting discussion. If anybody wants to take this a bit further and have a look at that, I think that will be one worth viewing.
Fantastic, brilliant. Well, obviously, loads going on across the markets, and that's been a really interesting introduction. So that's it from us. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's been a whistle-stop tour, bite-sized overview of D&I in the insurance sector. I hope that we have summarised for you some of the major challenges that the industry is facing and some of the exciting projects that are up and running, and the opportunities that are there for insurance businesses to grow their pool of talent. It's about, I think, change at an institutional and a corporate level, yes, but also for all of us that work in the sector to be part of the change and to understand these issues and to help to make the sector a more diverse and welcoming place to work. Briony, have you got anything you want to say before we depart?
Yeah, I would just echo your comments, really. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We can borrow from other industries who have already successfully implemented D&I strategies, and we can make use of the resources and tools that are already available within our own industry. I do think we're fortunate enough to work in an industry that is well known for already being quite collaborative. We foster relationships between underwriters, brokers, claims people, our lawyers. We have market meetings where we work with our competitors to come together to achieve an outcome. So I think we already have the right approach and attitude for this to extend into the D&I space.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Well, that's it from us. Thanks very much and goodbye.